Harry stepped out of a car in central London. No flashing lights around him, no unmarked police vehicle trailing behind. Just him, alone, exposed in a way he hadn't been since he was a boy. For most of his life, that would have been unthinkable. A prince of the House of Windsor, walking the streets of his own homeland, without the invisible shield that had followed every senior royal for generations. But this wasn't a security lapse. It was a decision, made in an office, by a committee most people in Britain have never heard of, and it would trigger one of the most bitter, most personal legal fights in the modern history of the royal family. A fight that, at its core, wasn't really about police officers or budgets at all. It was about belonging. If you've ever wondered what it costs a person to walk away from the institution that raised them, this is that story. Stay with us, because by the end, you'll understand why Prince Harry took his own government to court, not once, but 3 times, and why the king himself was, reportedly, watching every step of it with quiet, aching concern. Let's go back to the beginning. To understand why the loss of a police escort could shatter a man, you have to understand what that escort actually meant. For Harry, security wasn't a luxury. It was survival. He was 6 years old when his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, first learned what happened when the protection wasn't enough. The paparazzi chased her through the streets of Paris in the August of 1997, and she never came home. Harry has spoken about this, carefully, rarely, but when he has, the weight of it has been unmistakable. He grew up knowing, in the most brutal way possible, exactly what could happen when the cameras got too close and the protection wasn't there. So when he became a father himself, when he had a wife, Meghan, and children of his own to think about, security wasn't paperwork to him, it was personal. It was the ghost of his mother's final hours, following him into every decision he made about his family's safety. Now fast forward. The year is 2020. Harry and Meghan announced something that shakes the monarchy to its foundations. They are stepping back, leaving their roles as working royals, moving, eventually, across the Atlantic to the United States. The press calls it Megxit. The family, reportedly, calls it something far more painful behind closed doors. And almost immediately, a quiet, bureaucratic decision follows that will echo for years. The Home Office, acting on the advice of a body called RAVEC, the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, strips Harry of his taxpayer-funded police protection in the United Kingdom. No more officers, no more armed escort, no more intelligence access when he lands on British soil. Just gone. Overnight, the boy who had been shadowed by trained protection since infancy became, in the eyes of the state, a private citizen. And here's where it gets complicated. Harry didn't ask for special treatment. Not at first. He offered to pay, out of his own pocket, for the same officers, the same training, the same access to British intelligence that had kept him alive his entire life. It seemed, on the surface, like a reasonable compromise. The British government said no, and that single refusal, that one word, would ignite a legal war that would drag Prince Harry back to a courtroom in London, again and again, for years. Because to Harry, this wasn't about money. It was about whether the country of his birth still considered him and his children worth protecting. By early spring of 2022, Harry's lawyers filed for a judicial review. They wanted a judge to examine whether RAVEC's decision had even been lawful in the first place. The argument was pointed. Harry claimed he'd never been given a chance to make what his team called informed representations before the committee stripped his protection away. In other words, he said he was never properly heard. That July, Judge Jonathan Swift handed Harry a partial win. The case, the judge ruled, could go forward to a full hearing. For a moment, it looked like momentum was on Harry's side. But the government wasn't finished. Lawyers for the Home Office pushed back hard, arguing that allowing wealthy individuals to essentially purchase elite police protection set a dangerous precedent. One line from their submission would be repeated in headlines for years to come. RAVEC, they said, did not believe the wealthy should be allowed to buy protective security from specialist officers, even ones prepared to carry firearms. It was blunt, and it stung, because underneath the legal language was an unmistakable message. This wasn't about safety anymore. It had become about status, about whether a prince who'd walked away from royal duty still deserved to be treated like one. And Harry, according to those close to him, took that personally. By May of 2023, the first real verdict arrived. Harry lost. A high court judge ruled against his bid to personally fund his own protection detail, siding with the government's position that private citizens, regardless of wealth or background, should not be able to pay for elite police services. It was a blow, a public, humiliating one. But Harry didn't walk away. He pushed forward instead, insisting the core question, whether the original 2020 decision to remove his security had been reasonable in the first place, still deserved to be answered in full. And so the case rolled on into a trial that would put Harry himself in the witness box, because the next chapter of this story wasn't just about lawyers and paperwork anymore. It was about a prince, under oath, describing exactly what fear for his family's life felt like. And what happened next would pull his own father, the king, into the middle of it all. That's where we pick things up next. If you've made it this far, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for Royal Talks TV. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. Harry, under oath. Something almost unheard of for a senior member of the royal family. In December of 2023, he stood in the witness box and made a plea that felt less like legal argument and more like something raw, something personal. He told the court that the United Kingdom was, in his words, central to the heritage of his children, a place he wanted them to feel at home, just as much as the house they were growing up in America. Think about that for a moment. A prince, born and raised on this soil, forced to explain, in a courtroom, why his own children deserved to feel connected to their birthright. It should never have needed saying, but there he was, saying it anyway, and behind that plea sat something deeper. Because throughout the case, Harry's legal team raised a detail that cut closer to home than any government policy ever could. They pointed to the royal household itself. 2 representatives sit on the Megxit committee, the very body that had stripped Harry's protection. And Harry's lawyers argued that the household's influence on that committee had been significant. Some close to the case would later suggest something even sharper, that the palace had used the threat of losing security almost as leverage, a quiet pressure point, to discourage Harry and Meghan from stepping back in the first place. If true, it meant the family Harry had grown up trusting to protect him may have played a hand in the decision that left him exposed. It's the kind of detail that turns a legal filing into something almost Shakespearean. A son fighting an institution that his own father sits at the very top of. And that brings us to February of 2024. The High Court delivered its verdict. Retired Judge Sir Peter Lane rejected Harry's case outright. Across 52 pages of ruling, Megxit's decision, the judge concluded, had been legally sound, neither irrational nor procedurally unfair. For Harry, it was a gutting blow. A legal spokesman for the Duke responded immediately, insisting Harry wasn't asking for special treatment, only for Megxit to follow its own written policy, fairly and consistently. But the court had spoken, and just weeks later, in April, Harry was dealt a second setback. A judge refused him permission to even challenge that ruling in a higher court. For most people, that would be the end of the road. 2 doors slammed shut in quick succession. But Harry has never been most people. His legal team went around the refusal entirely, appealing directly to the Court of Appeal itself. And in a surprising turn, in June of 2024, the Court of Appeal agreed to hear the case after all. The fight was back on. Behind the scenes, though, something else was unraveling, something that had nothing to do with paperwork or precedent. Harry's relationship with his father. By this point in the saga, King Charles III and his younger son were, by most credible accounts, barely speaking. Harry has said publicly that he would like to reconcile, that the door, from his side, remains open. But according to people close to the situation, the king has been reluctant to engage, particularly while litigation over the security issue drags on. It's a strange, aching standoff. A father and son, divided not just by distance, but by an active legal battle that puts one of them, indirectly, in conflict with an institution the other now leads. Harry has reportedly said he doesn't know how much time his father has left to make peace. A reference to the king's own cancer diagnosis, revealed to the public in early 2024, there's something almost unbearable about that image. A son fighting for the right to bring his children safely to see their grandfather. While that same fight may be part of what's keeping the two men apart, now, the story moves to its most public, most consequential turn. April of 2025, 2 days, the Royal Courts of Justice in London. Harry, back on English soil, not for a visit, but for a hearing that could decide, once and for all, whether his family would ever again receive the level of protection he'd spent nearly 5 years fighting for. Journalists packed the courtroom. Cameras lined the street outside, and as Harry walked out after the final day of arguments, he turned to a reporter and said something quietly devastating. He was, in his own words, exhausted and overwhelmed. For a man who had once stood confidently before the world at his mother's funeral, at his wedding, at the birth of his children, those 2 words told you everything about what this fight had cost him. The ruling wouldn't come immediately. For weeks, Harry would be left waiting, not knowing whether 5 years of legal battle, public scrutiny, and personal heartbreak had been worth it. And when the judges finally did speak, their words would not be what Harry hoped to hear. The verdict landed on the 2nd of May, 2025. 3 senior judges, Lord Justice David Bean, Lord Justice Andrew Edis, and Sir Geoffrey Voss. Their decision, unanimous. Harry's appeal, dismissed. The Court of Appeal upheld the High Court's earlier ruling in full. Ravek, they concluded, had acted lawfully when it downgraded Harry's protection back in February of 2020. One line from the ruling would be quoted again and again in the days that followed. Sir Geoffrey Voss told the court that Harry had, in effect, been stepping in and out of the cohort of protection provided by Ravek, coming and going from the UK as a private citizen, rather than a permanent working member of the family. Outside the UK, the judges noted, he receives no such government protection at all. It was measured, legal, precise. And it was also, for Harry, the end of the road, at least for this particular case. 5 years of fighting, multiple hearings, thousands of pages of legal argument, all of it, ultimately, unsuccessful. Harry's team released a statement afterward, and in it, the prince didn't hide his devastation. He said, through representatives, that his worst fears had been confirmed, that this case had never been about the money, but about whether his family could be safe on British soil. It's worth sitting with that phrase for a second. Worst fears confirmed. Not disappointment, not frustration, fear. The same fear that had shaped his entire adult life, ever since a summer night in Paris in 1997. For many watching from the outside, this looked like the final chapter. A prince, defeated by his own government, forced to accept that his children would grow up visiting a country where their own safety could no longer be guaranteed by the state. And for a while, that's exactly how it felt. The relationship with King Charles, meanwhile, showed little sign of thawing. Harry has said publicly that he's ready to reconnect, that he doesn't want to carry this rift forward indefinitely. But according to reports at the time, the king simply wouldn't take his calls, not while the security case remained a live, adversarial legal matter between Harry and an arm of the British state that the royal household itself had some hand in. It left an almost unbearable picture, a father and son, an ocean apart, geographically and emotionally, with a 5-year-old legal case standing between them like a locked door neither one could quite bring themselves to open. But then, something changed, quietly, without fanfare, almost unnoticed by anyone not paying extremely close attention. In January of 2026, just months after the Court of Appeal had delivered its crushing verdict, Ravek conducted an internal review of Harry's risk assessment. Not a court case this time, not a judge, not a public hearing, just a review, and the outcome of that review would shift the entire trajectory of this story. Because after everything, after the losses, the appeals, the very public heartbreak, Ravek ruled in Harry's favor. Let that land for a second. The same committee that had spent half a decade defending its original decision in court, the same body whose lawyers had once argued that officers shouldn't be turned into private bodyguards for the wealthy, quietly reversed course. No trial forced that outcome. No judge ordered it. Something else did. And to understand what that something else was, and what it might mean for Harry, for his children, and for the fragile, fractured relationship with his father, we need to look at exactly what happened behind those closed doors in January. Because the ending to this story isn't the one anyone, including Harry himself, necessarily expected. That's exactly the sticking point this story hinges on. Because in December of 2025, Harry did something he'd never quite done before. He didn't go to court. He went, quietly, straight to the top of the political system instead. Writing a private letter to the British Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, personally requesting a full and current risk assessment, not a legal filing, a request, from one person to another. And remarkably, it worked. RAVEC's Risk Management Board, the specialist panel of senior police and security officials who actually assess threat levels, agreed to conduct its first comprehensive review of Harry's case since the very beginning, back in 2020. According to reports at the time, the timing wasn't random. Insiders pointed to two unsettling incidents from September of 2025, a stalking episode during a UK visit, where a woman reportedly gained unusually close physical access to Harry at a public event, and, days later, a second close encounter, reportedly stopped only because a private security guard intervened in time. For a family already shaped by tragedy, by loss on a Paris road nearly 3 decades earlier, incidents like that weren't abstractions, they were warnings. And by early January of 2026, sources briefed on the process began telling reporters something extraordinary: that reinstatement, full, automatic, armed police protection, was, in the words of one insider, now essentially a formality. Home Office sources were quoted using similarly confident language. People close to the process described the internal tone as positive. It's worth pausing here to acknowledge something important. These accounts at the time were based on unnamed sources, insiders, people familiar with the process, not, as of yet, an official public confirmation carved into policy. But by January the 7th, reporting indicated RAVEC had, in fact, concluded that Harry now met the threshold required for full protective coverage during future UK visits. A conclusion driven, reportedly, by updated intelligence rather than any court ruling. The irony is almost too neat to be real. 5 years of losses, 3 separate courts, millions of words of legal argument, all ending in defeat. And then, in the end, what appears to have moved the needle wasn't a judge at all. It was a letter, and 2 frightening moments outside a courtroom, far from any barrister's argument. There's a lesson buried in that. About institutions and how they change, not always through confrontation, but sometimes through patience and the slow accumulation of undeniable facts. Now, layered on top of all of this, sits the most human thread of the entire story: King Charles III. By early 2026, reports connected to his ongoing cancer treatment had become part of the public conversation again, and with them, renewed speculation about how much time remained for the king and his younger son to resolve their estrangement. Harry has said, in the past, that reconciliation matters deeply to him, that the door remains open from his side, and several royal commentators, watching the security review unfold, suggested something quietly hopeful: that restoring Harry's protection wouldn't just be a policy correction, it could be the first real, practical step toward Harry, Meghan and their children, Archie and Lilibet, being able to visit the UK safely enough for a face-to-face reunion with their grandfather. Something that, by this point, had not happened in years. Whether that reunion ever truly happens, whether father and son find their way back to each other in whatever time they have left, is not something any court or any committee can decide. That part of the story still belongs entirely to 2 men, and the choices only they can make. But here's what we do know, looking back at everything this fight actually was. It was never really about armed officers, or budgets, or legal precedent. It was about a boy who lost his mother on a chaotic street in Paris, who grew into a man determined never to let that happen to the people he loved, and who spent half a decade fighting the very institution his own family led, simply to be believed. Whatever comes next for Prince Harry, his father, and the fragile threads still connecting them, This much is certain. Some fights aren't really about the thing being fought over at all. They're about being seen, being heard, being kept safe by the people who are supposed to keep you that way. And sometimes, the truest measure of a family isn't found in a courtroom. It's found in whether, after everything, they still choose to find their way back to one another. If you've made it this far, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for Royal Talks TV.